All right, we're at 1 minute past the hour, 2 o'clock here on the East Coast. I want to thank everyone for joining us for episode 6 of Ask the Howlers. A bit of housekeeping before we get started. We'll switch to the next slide here and take you through a few questions. Who are the Howlers, first of all? The Howlers are a team of VMware Carbon Black security pros. I like to say they have security in their DNA. Our team of Howlers, think of them like evangelists, thought leaders who, outside of their day jobs, do activities just like this, right? Talking security, the ins and outs, giving our audiences a new perspective in many cases. And they blog, they are on social media for us, they do media engagements, but the top guns, I like to say, of the VMware Carbon Black security family. And in these sessions, we like to talk about the latest news, right? There's a lot to talk about today. If you've been following the cybersecurity news or any news channel in general, and we offer the opportunity for Q&A. So this is a discussion. We are live right now. So if you have a question, thought, disagreement, agreement, pop into that chat, give us your question, give us your thoughts, and we will try to address them either on the fly or at the end of the session. It's about 30 minutes. We try to pack a lot into a short time frame. So why don't we get started here and introduce today's guests. On our next slide, you'll see, so my name is Ryan Murphy. I'm a member of the Carbon Black founding team, currently work in the communications department at VMware. But the reason you are here today is to meet our guest, our resident Howler R Trent Greenwood. Trent, thanks for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And Neil Wyler, better known as Grifter. So we like to extend the invitation for these sessions to beyond the proper Carbon Black Howler team to other experts in the field. Neil's certainly one of them, currently at RSA doing threat hunting and IR, but he's had experience at Black Hat, RSA, so many other organizations where his influence has been felt. So Neil, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Great. All right, guys. So let's get into it, right? It was a busy night overnight when it came to cybersecurity news. We had two major breaking stories. Let's tackle the first one before anything, right? The Twitter breach. It was noted that multiple high-profile accounts had been hacked. There was a cryptocurrency campaign underway. It's easy, right, to look at an organization that becomes the victim of a breach and point fingers and place blame. Clearly, we're not here to do that, but Trent and Grifter, you had a chance to discuss this breach before we did this session. Give us some high-level thoughts, and Grifter, we'll start with you, and we'll go to Trent.
Sure. So I think, it is a little early to comment really on what we know, because we're still finding things out, every minute. It's one of the things I love about our industry, right, is that you wake up one morning and it's a fairly boring or benign day, and by the end of the day, everything's on fire and you're just trying to figure out what's going on. It makes it super exciting. I know it's why I love it. But I think what's interesting, at least some of the things that we know now, is that one, this wasn't a technological failing, right? This was, what we're saying is that this was a successful social engineering campaign. So that's huge, right? So we know that if we have all of these blinky boxes and all of this different stuff that we put into place, that in the end, it's up to us, the users, to make sure that we're the key to the security on the back end. I think probably another point before I hand it over to Trent is also, this could have been much worse. Right. Like the fact that it was financially motivated, and that it was somebody who was like, I need to get me some Bitcoin or whatever, that is, like, I'm happy that it was that, because with the level of the high profile accounts that they could take over, they could have started a mass panic hysteria, by having these verified accounts putting out anything they wanted. But instead they were like, please add some cryptocurrency to this tip jar. And I think, we should feel lucky that that's how this ended up.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was on a text thread with a few of the other Howlers last night, and they echoed the same sentiment. Like, think about what they could with respect to DMs or wide-ranging posts. A little short-sighted. I don't want to appear critical of the attacker here, lest our own accounts come under fire. But certainly, it seemed like more could have been done from a nefarious standpoint. And Trent, before the session, you were talking about how like the insider credential access here lend to not only the social engineering aspect, but the prospect, right? And the note again that insider threat in multiple capacities is still very much a relevant concept. You want to articulate that a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, it is, right? I mean, you think about it, it's somebody that was able to, so first of all, it's somebody, the accounts, right, that have been reported at least is the accounts that they had that back end access. And, you know, what that sort of access, typically the people that have it are typically folks that are going to be on their toes, and a lot of times you hate to say are immune to like a social engineering attack because they're going to be paying attention, but certainly they're far less likely than others may be, right? Because they really have to be on their toes to prevent something like this. So, and when you look at, and they still haven't really understood how far this is, or at least they haven't reported it, right? So we can only speculate. But the possibility that they were able to actually get into people's DMs and see that sort of information that was behind the scenes there, I mean, that is really, you know, that's some scary, that's some scary stuff. Because a lot of times people will try to remain anonymous, but yet they'll pull that cloak back a little bit in their DMs and talk with other people and maybe reveal additional information. So who knows what existed in those high profile account DMs between the different people that they have access to.
That's true, actually. Yeah, and not to like Murph, not to like, you know, like you said, maybe it was a little short-sighted in at least the monetary aspect of it, because I think they got I think they're saying right now a little that wallet had about $100,000 worth of cryptocurrency transferred to it. But what is the value of the data that's in those DMs?
Yeah.
Right? Like, who knows the you know, blackmail or extortion types of possibilities that existed within there. You know, not to, you know, show my dark side there, but I'm like, oh, the possibilities, right?
No, it's a very real concern, right? And you know, the financial side of it could just be the first phase, and if there's data extracted from that, like, who knows what will come of it. And we're of course, right, 3 months away from the presidential election, and it's hard to think that if there is information available through this Twitter breach or other that we're not going to see that come out in potential influence in either direction of the election.
Oh yeah, I know. I'll be watching this story closely.
It's
Well, well, and one other thing, right? Think about this, right? The whole verification process now.
Yeah.
So it's so what does that look like now, right? Going forward, and what do they do? Maybe if you've got a verified account, maybe that they're going to have to put additional security controls in place that if it wasn't a verified account, you wouldn't have to have, only because they are, you know, people look at that blue check, and that blue check carries a lot of weight. So there's that aspect to it as well. I mean, it's going to be super interesting. It's going to be super interesting to see kind of how this thing plays out.
Yeah, and potential silver lining that it occurred in July and say not like October 30th, right, where you're so much closer to the election. You know, I chuckle when these stories hit a little, and certainly not in a humorous way. When there is an attack launched against a major consumer-facing institution like Twitter, cybersecurity is thrust into the public's consciousness more than it typically is, right? If you are a news consumer and you are looking at run-of-the-mill breaches, so to speak, or conceptually the threat of a nation-state attack, there's a good chance you're going to gloss over it. But when Twitter is involved, or it's a social media company, or say like a major banking institution, people tend to pay attention. And then we wake up this morning and we have an advisory from the UK National Cybersecurity Center detailing alleged activities by the Russian hacking group APT29 that's targeting the US, UK, and Canadian vaccine research and development organizations, right? So, if you look at the news cycle of it, it's like, oh, that the Twitter breach is over, right? And certainly not, right? But from the public conscious perspective, waking up, COVID-19 is the story, has been the story for the longest time. And now a nation state allegedly involved in trying to steal intellectual property. Grifter, when you see a story like this hit, beyond the humanity aspect of it, where you look at it and say, these groups don't have any shame, right? We're trying to solve this on a global scale. From a cybersecurity perspective, what do you think? Like, when you wake up today, like, I just kind of laugh, like 2 stories in a row, you see this story, what goes through your mind?
So I guess I don't know. Let's mark today down as Grifter is optimistic today, because this is another story that, like, when I was looking at it, and initially, like, some of the headlines made it look really, really scary in that it was, potentially Russian attackers attacking organizations who are doing research for vaccines, right? That sounds like, oh, are they trying to disrupt the potential creation of a vaccine for this horrible, virus? But in reality, it's more, the industrial espionage take, where it's like they're acting more in a role of a spy, where they're going in and targeting these organizations and trying to gather their research so that they can then use that to, boost the speed of development of vaccine for their organization. So again, I guess, for me, I'm just going to echo, like, it could have been worse. I understand the huge financial impact that whoever is first to market with a vaccine for COVID-19 is probably going to make more than the $100,000 that this Twitter hack partners. Right. So I think, like I said, mark me down as the optimist today. I'm feeling pretty good about that.
I like the rare cybersecurity pro with the optimistic perspective. So
yeah, well, check in with me tomorrow. We'll see how it goes.
So Trent, to play devil's advocate, I suppose you have to be the resident pessimist. You're anything but that. I've worked with you for many years, and you're that. But when you see an attack like this, right, it's intellectual property theft, and that is nothing new. It's just thrust into the public consciousness more than it is, say, when it's China targeting the financial institutions or healthcare organizations. I mean, do you look at this and say, I'm clearly not surprised, or is there some level of, indignation when you see an attack like this?
No, I mean, I'm not surprised at all, right? I mean, and really, to Grifter's point, I mean, it could have been worse, right? It could have been somebody maybe going in and manipulating data, and maybe they did, right? We don't know, but that doesn't really appear to be what it is. Someone that's doing it for nefarious reasons. And the headlines kind of point to that, right? They like that drama, but to me, when you read into it, right, you all of a sudden start hearing the cash register go off, because essentially what they're looking at is there's been some reports it costs anywhere from $500,000 $500 million to up to $5 billion to create a vaccine, right? Well, particularly in this pandemic state where this vaccine is going to have to go all over the world. I mean, there's big dollars at stake. So even if these people are willing to, the people that took this information, they have the potential to make a huge windfall, because pharmaceutical company, if I can cut my development time in half, and those costs, I don't know if I don't have a lot of ethics, and some people might argue that if you're in the pharmaceutical industry, your ethics can't be questioned. But that's an easy decision to make. Yeah, I'll buy that from you for $500 million, because that's going to save me at least that much. I'm going to be first to market, and I'm going to make that back 10 times as much.
Yep.
And again, they're going to go into, this is going to be a negotiation, right? They're going to go in, and it'll be for the highest bidder. So it'll be interesting. But yeah, I mean, it could have been it may be worse. It certainly reads that way off the top, but I think this is all about the dollars.
Yep, and certainly would not be the first time, if true, that Russia attempted to show its influence over the West in a cyber capacity, right? The 2016 election, of course, the allegations there have been in the news for quite some time, and the prospect of it happening again is certainly or should be a worry of the current administration and cybersecurity pros that work for it, right? All right, let's, guys, that was 15 minutes that we did on just the news that hit last night. So we were pretty agile in amending our agenda to fit that. But Trent, I wanted to jump into a blog that you wrote not too long ago. The article that you initially shared from May, right? So a court ruled that Capital One must allow plaintiffs to review Mandiant's forensic report related to a data breach. And of course, the bank protested that, of course, being a protected legal document. You said this ruling sets a potentially very dangerous precedent when it comes to IR engagements. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, you've been able, organizations have the ability not to always be forthright with what went on in a breach like this, right? And it protects that organization in a lot of ways. It protects them from that legal liability. That's why you look at like an Equifax, right? They did everyone wound up filing class action lawsuits, and the best that anybody was going to get out of that really was, like what, $127. Well, right. now with something like this, well, I'm not going to get in on a class action lawsuit, right? I'm going to find out exactly how culpable and how many mistakes and things that the organization did maybe on their side to save money, because they didn't really view security that important, yet they put all my information at risk, right? So I'm going to hold out for that. And the fact now that the court has kind of said, hey, you have to tell us everything that, everything that was known now has to be revealed, right? We're really pulling back the curtain on this. You can't claim that this is confidential or private information, that we're just going to give you the bits and pieces that benefit us.
Yep.
That's kind of out the window now. So super interesting. And depending on which side you fall on, right? If you're a security practitioner, in a weird way, this kind of helps you make your case for additional staff, additional tools, things like that to help you secure that organization. So yeah, that's kind of what I meant by that.
Yeah, and Grift, a great place to bring you in, right, as an IR pro for many years. Like, say that rule is appealed and is shot down through multiple courts, and this becomes the standard. How do you feel that it would change your job and IR professionals' job when they're doing engagements?
So here would be, I guess, my worry about something like that. So again, how Trent was saying, like, depends on what side you fall on, right? If you are the consumer, having this report be public is great, because it means that you can come back and say, this is a third-party report that says that these steps weren't taken in order to secure the organization. This is how the attack took place. They took these things. They had known that these areas were insecure for X amount of time, especially if they have like a team in there where they've got, like somebody like a retainer or a managed service provider who's doing stuff for them, who's like suggesting, oh, you should do this, or oh, here are some areas you can improve security, and the organization decides not to. Having that data public as a consumer is great, because then you can come back and say, give me more money. You knew that you should have been responsible for these things and you didn't take the steps to secure them. So great. Now, as the organization, that really sucks because now there's increased liability on you, that if the report comes out and says that you didn't take the steps, then you're going to be, liable for additional funds somewhere. To Trent's point, if you're part of the security team for that organization, maybe you're like, cool, we're going to get more budget because now we know that they have to close those gaps. Now, here's the other thing, and this is the part that makes me kind of worry, is what does that mean as the third-party organization? So in this case, with Capital One, the third-party organization was Mandiant. And Mandiant had been on retainer for these guys for years. And there's no scenario that exists in my mind where a team as sharp as the Mandiant team is didn't go in there and make recommendations for certain things and then not have them followed through, right? But what does that mean when the organization can come back to you and say, do not put these types of things in the report. Do not want you to include this or this, because should that come out, we'll be held legally liable for this or that. Or, so what does that do when you're a security company who wants to go in there and make sure things are secure and make all the right recommendations, but now you have a company who really is just saying, we're putting you on retainer, or we're asking you to do this report because we need to checkbox this, thing over here and say we're in compliance with whatever. Do not include these aspects of this into the report, or we will no longer retain your services. So if this becomes a normal thing, I worry about what the position puts security organizations in as those third parties. Because I've only been in that situation, in a situation similar to that, twice in my career as in IR, where I was like, "Hey, we discovered this thing," and they're like, "Stop talking." I'm like, "What?" Wow. And they're like, "Stop talking," because the moment you say what you're, and I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm trying to tell you that," and they're like, "I need you to stop talking," and I'm like, "What?" And they're like, "Conversation's over. Thank you for your time." Because if you continue that conversation now, you have to, the clock starts somewhere. Once that clock starts, you can't stop it. And so I feel like that situation could happen here. Or once those reports, that they could potentially be in the public eye, companies may start dictating what they want to see in that report to try to shove some of the liability somewhere else or make it non-existent.
Yeah, it seems like this ironic effort to create more transparency, but then creating limitations on transparency for a multitude of reasons. Yeah, it's definitely complex. And Trent, thanks for producing that blog for VMware Carbon Black. Final topic we'll go to before getting into any questions. And again, if you're in the audience, you have a question, thought, type it into that chat and certainly address it. Trent, we talked about ransomware's evolution to extortionware. A number of articles recently supporting that. Can you delve into a little bit deeper how that evolution is occurring and how it's becoming a negotiation process on a very, very business level when it comes to ransomware?
Yeah, sure. So and really one of the reasons why I call it extortionware, right, is because what is starting to happen now is we're starting to see in these large organizations where a organization will have a ransomware attack done, and typically now what's being done in a lot of these ransomware attacks is they're actually before they take and lock up the machines, right? They're doing a data scrape. They're getting a lot of data and gathering it all up. Then they're kind of launching the ransomware attack, right? And locking everything up. And because they've got that data, then they're going back to the organizations and they're saying, "Hey, yeah, you really need to pay us, because if you don't, and oh, by the way, even if you have backups, we don't care. If you don't, we're going to turn you in this instance where this article was, we're turning you into GDPR. So now you're going to have to face fines for all of this stuff that you had. And oh, by the way, you can't deny that it doesn't exist because we have it all. We've got all this information. So they really have organizations over a barrel when it comes to this stuff. So it's really, I mean, for the attacker, it's a win-win. You know, gone are the days now of, well, we'll just rely on a backup. Okay, cool. Go ahead and back the stuff up, but we're going to dump this out and we're going to leak this. We're not only going to leak it to the dark web, but we're also going to take and turn you in for compliance violations. So you'll have to deal with those folks as well. And Neil actually turned me on to a very interesting one, which I'll flip it over to him and let him kind of talk about involving, you know, a university. And governments and universities are really low-hanging fruit because they've got to pay. They really have to pay. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So I'll let, you know, kind of stepping in, I'll throw it over to Neil and let him kind of talk about that example.
Yeah, I think, you know, the extortion aspect of it is interesting. And like you said, like once you've exfiltrated data as well, it's like you're going to get your money either way as the attacker, because you're either going to get the ransom paid, or you can go and basically bid on, have somebody bid on the data that you're offering. You can go on dark market sites right now and find people who are like, I've got this much data from this company. What's interesting about like the evolution of ransomware to extortionware is, like you mentioned, this particular case with UCSF, where they were like, okay, they had exfiltrated a bunch of data, they posted it to their website or their blog. You know, they were like, we're going to put this up on our public site that we have this data, and then reached out to the university and said, now, like literally the quote is, "Hi UCSF, don't be shy. We can work together on the current incident." So that's how they start the exchange, where it's like, we're going to start negotiating now for how much you're going to pay us. The university comes back and says, please take the data down off the site and we can start to negotiate. They come back and say, we took the data down, now let's discuss. And they ask for $3 million. And they go back and forth, like, you know, like you're with a used car salesman, like back and forth. Oh, let me find this out. Literally at one point, the conversations, he says, let me go talk to my supervisor, which lets you know how big of a business ransomware has become. And they eventually settle on $1.14 million. They're like, this is as much as we can get. And then you can see that there is a transfer of X number of Bitcoin to a wallet that, you know, equates to $1.14 million. And so we saw things years ago where ransomware started having things like technical support, where you could chat or even call like toll-free numbers to have them help you buy your Bitcoin. And now we're having these like negotiations back and forth in those chats. I can only pay this, well, I can pay that much. Gone are the days of the $300 ransomware. Now we're talking about $1 million extortion.
And it seems like gone are the days too, where the blanketed in a vacuum recommendation to simply not pay the ransom is certainly in theory the way to go. But there are so many other factors. Trent, you mentioned education. There are instances in healthcare, right, where not paying a ransom potentially puts lives at risk. Anyway, it's an interesting evolution. I'm interested to track it over time. We're coming up on the half hour here, and that absolutely flew by. I'd love to have both of you guys on again. In closing, right, so I'm a big fan of the Tim Ferriss podcast. He usually closes his sessions with a guest, right, asking them if you could put one phrase on a billboard, right, and I turn that to a cybersecurity lens here, right? If you could put one phrase on a billboard, non-commercial, so you're not trying to sell anything, it's just your general advice or philosophy about cybersecurity on a billboard, what would it be? And Trent, I'll start with you.
Oh, that's put me on the spot. I mean, I'm gonna go with the old cliche, right? Patch your stuff.
Yep, that's a good one. It's a good one, and one that a lot of people use, right? Grifter, any billboard worthy phrases that come to mind?
Hi, Mom. No, I think probably. I was having a discussion the other day with a friend, Jessica Bear, and like we were talking about things, and I always say trust but verify, and she's like, yeah, but honestly, the days of trust but verify are gone. Now, zero trust. That's it. Zero trust.
Yeah.
Start at zero and work your way towards trusting, and then once you do have trust but verify.
All right. I mean, that's a little more pessimistic than the optimism you brought earlier on, but certainly good advice in security today.
I said check with me tomorrow. No, you check with me in 20 minutes.
We didn't even have to wait a whole day.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love it.
Thank you both for the time, and this is always helpful. I enjoy the prep sessions for this, and certainly the live session. I want to thank both of you for joining. Neil, we're love to have you on again. Certainly Trent as well. Try to keep up that blog content for the VMware Carbon Black blog. We appreciate that. Also, Jackson and Samin on the back end for all their hard work in getting this set up for the audience, and all of you for joining us today. And before we close, I just wanted to call your attention to our last slide here, which is please join us for episode 7. So we'll be marketing that in the coming days. We'll have Sonara Marsh and Ryan Hedricks from the Carbon Black Howlers on. You can have a conversation with them, ask them questions, get their perspective. And in episode 7, we will have a special announcement. So another reason to join in. And if you're interested in more engagement with us, VMware Carbon Black this week had 2 interesting pieces of content. The first was our Global Threat Report series, which is a survey in 12 different countries of 250 CISOs getting their perspective on the attack landscape, how COVID-19 has influenced their programs, and how sophistication and volumes of attacks have changed over the course of the last year. We did that survey in 12 different countries. So if you head to the Carbon Black website right now, you'll find a report on a global scale, but also for various regions. So if you're joining us from, say, Australia or France or Italy, you can get data specific to your region to see what the latest attacks landscape is like. And the last item, July 15th was, of course, tax day. We did some research on the dark web to determine what listings were available on the dark web as it relates to tax return filings, from the Carbon Black Threat Research team. Came up with some pretty interesting information, and hopefully you all got your taxes done under the deadline, or at the very least filed an extension if you're joining us from the US. Again, Trent, Grifter, thank you so much for joining. Again, Jackson and Samin, thank you as well. And we look forward to seeing you for episode 7 very shortly. Thank you again for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you all very much.